Hello everyone, I am Aleksandar Tsankov and I am an intern at VALUE and a research master student of ancient history in Utrecht. Welcome to the first episode of the series Patchwork Empires, in which I will be looking at how Greeks and non-Greeks are represented in the Hellenistic world in video games. This will be aimed at discussing reinforcements of certain stereotypes, othering, and the West versus East conflict. These will be touched on at various stages throughout the series, and I will discuss how they appear in different video games and where these views can stem from. Moreover, I want to make it clear that when referring to Greeks and non-Greeks, and when making various comparisons, I am limiting this to the ancient world and to these video game worlds and the ideas they represent, not our current world. Depending on the game, my focus will be on different aspects. For example, in more military-oriented games, I will be looking at armies, and in grand strategy games, I will be looking at larger collections of aspects like religion, courts, tradition, and so on. The first game, or in this case game series, that I will be looking at are Rome Total War 1 and 2. The Total War games are strategy games with turn-based and real-time elements. While playing them, you take charge of a nation, you manage its finances, construct buildings, engage in diplomacy, but most importantly, you build armies and conquer your enemies. Due to the nature of the game, my focus will be on how non-Greeks are represented in the armies that you can build and less on other aspects. This game was released back in 2004 and was a huge hit for the genre, ranking as one of the 20 best-selling games of the year. The main campaign of the game takes place between 270 BCE and 14 AD and spans from most of Europe to North Africa and the Middle East. While the game is focused on Rome, I'll be looking at playable factions in the Balkans, Anatolia and the Middle East, as my focus will be on the Greeks and locals in these regions. To begin, let us look at the Thracians. The Thracians are a group of people that inhabited areas of the Eastern Balkans, currently modern-day Bulgaria, Turkey, Romania and Greece. Throughout history they have had close contact with Macedon and share many traditions, art, religion and cultural aspects. They have had close contacts with the Greeks and Persians as well, which have all left some influence on the Thracian people and their history. At the start of the game, historically the Thracians were not unified, and not much is known about which areas were ruled by who. Their cities and armies followed the trends of the other Hellenistic kingdoms, as they had become a part of the various networks established in the Hellenistic age. On the campaign map, they start in Tilis, which, while existing somewhere east of the Haemus Mountains, is not at all Thracian. Ironically, it was a settlement founded by Celtic invaders. These invaders destroyed the Thracian Odrysian capital of Sotopolis, thus having Tilis as the capital of the Thracians is quite a difficult choice to justify. In the north, they control Campus Getae, which is not at all where the Getae lived, and such a place did not even exist, but at least they are acknowledged as Thracians. As a result of this, not only are the Thracians given a city that did not exist, but their capital is not a Thracian city at all, but a Celtic one. The equivalent would be to have Rome's capital be in Carthage. The developers have simply bundled up Celts and Thracians of different regions into a single homogeneous whole. On the plus side, their cities are using Greco-Hellenistic aesthetic in the game, which does make sense as excavations of Thracian cities in this period have shown very heavy Hellenistic influences in their design. That is, if only Rome Total War featured any actual Thracian cities. This is the Bastarnae. They are the Thracian unique unit on the battlefield.
Good grief, he's naked!
They are wearing what's called a Thracian helmet and are also wearing greaves, both of which are very common and locally produced. Yet for some reason they are naked, and they are not the only naked unit in the Thracian roster. This is the Folksmen. They are also shirtless and wear no armor. The rest of the units are from the Greek roster. This leaves the Thracians with essentially no armored units and no hoplites, with the exception of the militia hoplites who are always shirtless. The unit descriptions of these units also complement their barbaric visage by referring to them flaunting the severed heads of their enemies or just straight up calling them barbaric. The contrast here is between that of the clothed and ordered Greek units and the wild, undisciplined and bloodthirsty other. Now we can see a clear distinction of what the game shows us as civilized, which is armed and clothed, and the uncivilized tribals who can't put on any covering. This is something that we can trace back to antiquity, as Diodorus describes the Thracians as people with barbaric ways whose feasts are riddled with poverty in comparison to those of the Hellenistic kings. The local Thracians are shown through such stereotypes which are created by foreign authors, and they are being reinforced by the game as a way to create a clear separation between them and the Greeks. The game reinforces the stereotypes of making the Thracians naked and look like Conan the Barbarian, in comparison to the well-established heroic bronze armor-wearing Greek hoplites. This trend is one that can be seen in many of the other playable factions, where the local units are more wild or weaker than the Greek ones. The next faction that we will be looking at is Pontus. The Pontic kingdom in the game represents a kingdom founded by Mithridates I a decade after the start of the game. It was a Hellenistic kingdom created after the fall of the Macedonian Antigonid dynasty that ruled much of Asia Minor. The Antigonids themselves were one of the successors of Alexander the Great's empire. The Pontic region for a long time has had ties to the Greek world through contact with the Greek colonies and the Thracian cities that were founded in northwest Asia Minor and across the Bosphorus. The dynasty that ruled Pontus may have had ties to the Achaemenid rulers of Persia, and Persian influences can be seen in Pontus along with Greek and local Anatolian ones. In the game, the people of Pontus boast a mixed roster between the Greek and Parthian units. Their primary infantry unit is the Eastern Spearmen, the entities of which are weaker than those of its Greek counterparts, and the way it makes up for it is through sheer numbers. They're not wearing any armor but are instead wearing loose pajama-like clothing. It almost makes them look like something that Herodotus would describe the Persians to look like in the Greco-Persian Wars. Once again, here we have an example of the stereotypes that are being reinforced. This one is also present in other forms of media, such as the movie 300, where the Persians are an endless horde of unarmored and undisciplined warriors. Herodotus and Aeschylus drive the point with comparison of the battle being between the Greek armor and the Persian cloth. The ridiculousness of these claims is even noted by Plutarch, who ridicules the Spartans for fighting an unarmed enemy. As a continuation of the wild naked warriors mentioned earlier, here again we have Thracian mercenaries who were using the Bastarnae naked model, and are called Thracian barbarians in their unit description. The rest of the units are using Greek models, with the exception of the unique Cappadocian cavalry, a highly sought after soldiers in this age, which for some absurd reason look like medieval Huns. As a final nail in the coffin, on the campaign map the Kingdom of Pontus's buildings are of Middle Eastern or Egyptian aesthetic, making their cities look like they're in the middle of a desert, thus further moving them away from their historical connections with Greece and a complete lack of anything distinctly Anatolian. Next is the largest of the Hellenistic states, the Seleucids, who in the historical record are known for their adaptability, usage of elephants, and making use of local and foreign elements in their army to strengthen themselves. The Seleucid administration was centered in Mesopotamia, and much of it was made up of locals who maintained the trade and government in these regions. Their army was made up of Greeks and locals from various parts of the empire, and it followed the popular Hellenistic hoplite-heavy tradition. In battle, their roster is instead almost entirely Greek, with the exception of the cataphracts and the elephants. Not even their light units, such as the peltas, are using a more appropriate for the game Persian model. They would still have the same stats, so that one could have taken their place instead of having a Greek one, but somehow apparently the Seleucids secured a constant heavy stream of Greeks for their armies. It's simply a cosmetic choice the developers have taken here to make the Seleucids appear more Greek and less mixed, because Greek is good and non-Greek is bad. Their buildings also do not reflect any local elements. The presence of non-Greeks in the lands of the Seleucids is almost entirely erased. Moving down to Egypt, which is another major Hellenistic kingdom ruled by the Ptolemaic dynasty, we discover that somehow Bronze Age Egypt was able to time travel 1000 years into the future, into the Hellenistic world. Thus we will ignore the time travelers and hope that they did not bring Ramses II with them.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
The final nation of Rome I are the Parthians. The Parthians at this time would not be as large as the game represents them, rather they would be a rebelling satrapy from the Seleucids. In time, they were able to successfully wrestle control over much of the Iranian territories of the Seleucids and replace them as the dominant power in the region. Their empire combined elements that dated back to the Achaemenid period, adopting the King of Kings title, but they also incorporated many Hellenistic traditions such as the style of coinage and the artistic and cultural influences that became popular in the Hellenistic world remained there for centuries. We have already covered the Eastern infantry when looking at Pontus. The main difference here is that they are sporting a magnificent pink color. All Parthian units are unarmored and weaker than any Greek faction's units, which is once again a repetition of the stereotypes that the Persians were more barbaric and weaker than the Greeks. They do not wear any armor and are numerous and undisciplined and simply rely on mass tactics. Their strength is in the cavalry and especially their cataphracts, but their unique Persian cavalry unit is made to look like Turkic nomads or medieval Huns for some reason. And there is this. This brings us to the end of the commentary on Rome 1, and as concluding remarks, I would like to say that the game makes a clear distinction between the Greeks and the non-Greeks by singling out the Greek units as better and making their models more elaborate. Stereotypes are being reinforced within the digital space, and these are stereotypes from antiquity. The West, the Greeks, they are strong, they are well armed and disciplined and civilized, while the people in the East, they are barbaric, unarmed, lazy and weak. The Thracians are naked barbarians, they are poor, uncultured and uncivilized. The Pontic people were for some reason mostly Persian, thus their cities also must look like they are in the middle of a desert. The Seleucids, they were a large Hellenistic kingdom, so they must be very Greek. We cannot have a mixed culture because that would mean adding weaker Eastern elements in it. The weaker units usually tend to be the local ones, and that is because we already have an image of the barbarian in our head, an image that exists in other forms of media as well, such as the previously mentioned movie 300. And the game makes sure to reinforce that the Greeks are civilized and great, while the locals are barbaric. Rome Total War does not introduce these stereotypes and ideas, but rather it reinforces them and makes them look like they're caricatures with naked pajama-wearing warriors clashing with bronze-armored Greek hoplites. I hope you have enjoyed the first video of this series, and I will see you in the next one covering Rome Total War's successor.